The format of this meeting is a 10-minute speaker, our secretary's announcements, a coffee and snack break, and our main speaker. Am I jumping the gun here? Okay. Also, first we have the 10-minute speaker, right? So our 10-minute speaker is Karla.
Hi everyone, my name's Karla. I'm an alcoholic. I want to start off first by saying that it's an honor and a privilege to participate in the program that has saved my life. I wouldn't be alive if it weren't for Alcoholics Anonymous. And I truly mean that with my whole heart. My sobriety date is November 4th of 2022. It's not my first sobriety date, but I trust that as long as I, do the program the way it's outlined in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous, that it will be my last. I took my first drink at 13 years old, and I can't tell you guys when I crossed the line from that first drink to becoming a fiend, but it happened very quickly for me. And it was because I was constantly paralyzed with fear, and booze and drugs and any substance that got me out of self was the cure to that. And so from that moment forward, I had made a commitment to myself that I was going to do whatever it took to feel that way all of the time. And I did just that up until, I came into the rooms. Fast forward to 24 years old, I was living in Los Angeles, and, I also had this idea that if my life looked a certain way, that I would be okay. If I had X, Y, and Z, if I had, the nice apartment, the guy, whatever the case may be, then, I would be okay. And so, in addition to drinking and this being my solution, I also just built a life that I thought was going to make me happy. When I first got to LA, things happened very quickly for me as far as, the accolades, the things, I built that life pretty quickly, and I also met the love of my life in a Whole Foods parking lot. His name was Douglas, and but what's crazy is at 24 years old, I remember standing in my apartment, and I looked around, and I had never been so broken, empty, and miserable. And what had happened was I experienced a shift, and my solution was no longer working. Right? Like I had become present for my experience. And what's crazy is I tried to stop, but I couldn't, And, from that moment on, I gave up, I had heard of the program. I had heard of rehabs, but I did not think that I was capable of, getting sober. I just did not think that someone like me could do it. And so I gave up, I stopped showing up to work, ended up losing that job, now I'm cheating, stealing, lying to the love of my life, end up losing him, and I lost it all. I burnt it all to the ground. And, my intention was never to get sober. And I think God knew that. I think God knew that I was never going to take the initiative to seek any sort of help. And the reason I say that is because of what followed next. So one day I got this bright idea that, what's going to fix me is if I get him back, right? If I get him back, maybe I'll go to treatment. Maybe I'll go to a rehab and get some help. And so I called him and I said, hey, I'm on my way to your apartment, and we're going to have a conversation. We're going to talk, and, we're going to work things out. We're going to get married, and we're going to have those kids we talked about. And he said, if you show up, I'm going to call the cops. And I showed up anyway. I didn't believe him, and the cops were there waiting for me. And in that moment, though, that was my last hope to happiness. And so that day I attempted suicide by cop. It was a very, very painful experience, and that was actually the last time that I up until a few years later, but that was the last time I had seen him. And so, I think I'm going to jail that day because I put a lot of people's lives in harm's way, but instead they ended up taking me to a treatment center called Charter Oak in Covina, California. And mind you, I'm living in Beverly Hills at this time. I got detained in Santa Monica. So the fact that I ended up in Covina was not a coincidence. I was meant to end up there. I was in that treatment center for about 30 days, and they recommended this sober living called the Puente House. If you know anything about the Puente House, it's a very structured, disciplined sober living that is revolved around Alcoholics Anonymous. And again, I did not end up there by coincidence. I was meant to be there. And so for the first time in my life, I'm able to wake up in the morning without having to put a substance in my body. I'm happy, I'm laughing. I've cultivated these relationships with so many women. I have all these new friends. I'm going to like 18 meetings a week because that's required if you want to live at the Puente House, you're not working. And I'm feeling great. I'm feeling amazing. And mind you, like I have a sponsor, but she doesn't really know she's my sponsor. I'm not really doing any steps, but I feel amazing, right? So it's like why do I don't think I got to do the steps, guys. Like I think, meetings are enough for me. But I have a thinking problem, not a drinking problem, and I can't manage my reactions to the world. I don't know how to manage my reactions to people, places, and things, and I also have really insane ideas. And so anytime I got uncomfortable, I relapsed, and I was in and out for like 6 years, and it took me a really long time to, I had accepted that I was an alcoholic, like I knew from the beginning, but it took me longer to accept the program as my only solution. And finally, I was beaten into a state of reasonableness where I really gave it a go, and I worked with a sponsor. I did the steps. I started sponsoring on my own. I had a lot of commitments, and I experienced a peace of mind that I had never experienced before. I started to fall in love with myself. I was no longer paralyzed by fear. I could, handle situations which used to baffle me. And I was in a really good place, and one night out of nowhere, I got this intuitive feeling that I needed to reach out to Douglas, that ex-boyfriend. Something just told me I needed to reach out. So I called my sponsor. I said, hey, I'm feeling this. She said, well, maybe it's time to make your amends. I didn't hesitate. I said, okay. I reached out to him. He was receptive. I made my amends. The only thing he asked of me in return was to continue doing what I was doing because sobriety looked good on me. For the next 2 weeks, I got to spend time with him. We reconnected, and after those 2 weeks, he had an allergic reaction to the COVID vaccine and passed away. 2 weeks after that amends. And what's crazy is I didn't think about drinking. I didn't think about using. If anything, I was grateful for the program for affording me that opportunity. I was grateful to God. I was grateful to my sponsor. I was just in full gratitude. And I think that kind of shows you where I was at in the program, right? To like have such a traumatic experience and be in gratitude. And it was really difficult, and I just became on fire for the program. I upped my program, and but this disease is cunning, baffling, and powerful. And 3 months later, it starts talking to me, right? My alcoholism started saying things like, people are tired of hearing about Douglas, move on, right? It's been 3 months. People don't want to hear about it anymore. Your sponsor's over it. Just move on. And slowly but surely, I started listening to my alcoholism, and I stopped talking about it. Now that I'm stopping, I'm not processing it anymore, I need to keep myself busy, so I'm throwing myself into work. I'm working like a maniac. Now that I'm working like a maniac, I don't have time to go to these meetings anymore. I don't have time to sponsor you. And, I stopped doing AA. And eventually I drank again, right? But I want to emphasize that, I did not stop. I didn't relapse as soon as I, stopped sponsoring those women, or when I stopped going to those meetings, or when I stopped calling my sponsor, right? But what was happening was I was weakening my defense, right? Because that's what this program is the defense against the first drink, And our 12th step states also having had a spiritual experience as a result of the steps, not as a result of my attendance or, the amount of friends that I have in the fellowship, right? As a result of the steps. And so slowly but surely my defense became weaker and weaker. And, I no longer had a defense when a drink presented itself, and I drank. And by the grace of God, I made it back. Not a lot of people do. One of my best friends died last year. His name's Jack Fransden. He died from a fentanyl overdose. And so I'm very grateful that I made it back. I called one of my heroes in Alcoholics Anonymous. His name is Karla, and I said, Carl, I need help. And he said, how fast can you get here? And that was November 3rd of 2022. And so at 29 years old, I was so desperate that I was willing to crawl into a top bunk and live with 20 other women and go back into the sober living because I knew that that's where I needed to be, and today I have an amazing life. I follow direction today from my sponsor. I have an amazing group of women that I connect with, that I'm able to share this journey with. I'm in the steps. I'm in the work. I have 2 sponsees. One of them is here tonight, and, to be able to also just see the light turn on in their eyes. I mean, to watch a resentment go from that to compassion and forgiveness is such an incredible experience to be a part of. And, I know that if I remain in the program and I stay in the middle, that I will stay sober and I can achieve long-term sobriety. And, all these things I did not think I was capable of. So if you're new, I just want to let you know that it does work, and it's coming from someone who did not think that it did.
Now our main speaker will share his or her experience, strength, and hope. Please join me in welcoming Jason.
I'll put my phone up here. Karla did that. It seemed to go very well for her. My name is Jason Johnson. I'm an alcoholic. Jason. Man, I'm sober today only by the grace of God and the solution I found in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I'm just going to throw this out here right now. This is the old side of the room. This is the young side of the room right over here, right? Obviously, you can hear. Oh, sorry, except for these 2 guys, right? Sorry about that. I shouldn't have probably said that out loud, huh? My sobriety date's 11/30/07. My sponsor's Karl. I'm his favorite. I'm self-appointed, right? But I'm his favorite. I have a home group. It's called The Shed. We meet on Thursdays at noon and Thursdays at 7 o'clock. But The Shed is on my property. So this side's welcome over here. That side, I don't know yet, right? We'll see how the talk goes. But if you ever get up to Oregon and you need a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, or you know somebody in Oregon that needs a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, please give me a call. And if you can't get a hold of me, call the Portland Intergroup office, and they'll give you my number. Man, Karla, you killed it. Man, unfortunately. Man. Guess I shouldn't have said that out loud either, huh? Man. Everything I have in my life that's of value or any good is a result of Alcoholics Anonymous. Anything I'm going to be that has any value or meaning is that the result of Alcoholics Anonymous. It's never good when the speaker starts crying before he even starts. And I know how the story ends, right? So it's even worse, right? It's like, Jesus. But for some reason, I just got caught up in the moment with Karla. Jeannie, happy birthday. She didn't start AA, but she was born when it started. So she's young. Man, let's just do this and get it out of the way, and then we'll go eat or something. My mom and dad got divorced when I was really young. My dad took off. I wouldn't see him for a long time. My mom was a hippie. I don't know if they have hippies in this part of California, but in Oregon they do. They smell like patchouli oil, right? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, finally, right? They stink. And I didn't mean that in a bad way. Yeah. But I knew we were hippies because we lived in a teepee, we lived in a log cabin, we lived on a school bus before it was popular, and we lived with a bunch of other hippies. And the reason I know they were hippies, they smelled the same way. And what my mom did, she grew pot for a living. And that, I know it's called cannabis now, not pot. Somebody stood in line to tell me that. But that's what she did, and during the day, everything was great, but at night, man, they'd start drinking and using, and then they start beating on each other, and they forget they were hippies, right? And I would see my mom get beat up on a regular basis, right? And I didn't know there was anything wrong with that, because the next morning I see my mom hugging that person or telling him she loved him, or either way. And my mom beat up some guys, right? So, it went both ways. But again, I didn't know there was anything wrong with that because everybody was loving each other the next morning. And that didn't make me an alcoholic. What it did is it gave me some skills in life as I got older that I used, right? I learned when I started feeling that violence and that starting to happen, I would try to de-escalate it by talking, or I'd run and hide. And that's what I did for the rest of my life, man, is I ran and hid, or I tried to de-escalate it. And, again, I didn't know there was anything wrong with that. When I was about going into the started kindergarten, my mom moved to town, and her house is a party house. I'm pretty sure you guys have those down here. It's one of those houses, like at 2 o'clock in the morning, there might be 20, 30 people in this house. Or at 2 o'clock in the morning as a little kid, I might be the only person there, right? And I learned right away that I learned how to make my own macaroni and cheese on the stove. I learned how to make popcorn on the stove. I learned how to draw a bath. And I learned how to survive when it got dark outside. Man, when it got dark outside, you just pull all the blinds down in the whole house. You turn every single light on, and you turn the TV up really loud. That way, if somebody comes to break in, they're going to think there's a party going on in there, and they'll go kill the neighbors. It worked. I'm here today. Right? Sorry. Selfish, self-centered right out the bat. But again, that didn't make me an alcoholic, right? It just made it. I didn't know there was a Leave It to Beaver. I didn't know people read book stories to their kids. I didn't know people tucked them in. I didn't know that, man. I just did what I had to do. And, my life was going along great until I started going into the first grade. It was the Sunday before school started. This side of the room's going to understand this. This side of the room might have to Google it, right? It was a Sunday night before school started, and I was watching this show called Happy Days. And, yeah, see? And all of a sudden the phone started ringing, and it's not like today that when the phone rings, it goes to voice message or it tells you who's calling. It rang until that person gave up or you answered it, right? And it just kept ringing all the way to commercial. And I thought, well, man, it must be important. Somebody's on that end. So I answered the phone. It was my grandma. And I don't know if there's any grandmas in here, but, man, you guys are way too invested in your grandkids' lives, right? You want to know, am I excited to go to school? No. Have you got your clothes laid out? Whatever. Have you wore your new shoes yet? Have you eaten dinner? Have you taken a bath? Stuff has absolutely nothing to do with Happy Days. Right? And so I'm just answering yes, trying to get off the phone. And she says, sweetie, let me talk to your mom. I said, oh, my mom's not here. She's down at the tavern. The phone number is 282-4440. If you call there, this guy Floyd's going to answer the phone. Ask for Darla, and it's going to take you a few minutes to get there. And she's going to tell you she's having one more pitcher of beer and she'll be home. Right? And there was like a long pause. And she said, sweetie, give me that number again. And I gave it to her. And she said, when my TV show was over, I need to go to bed. And when I get up to go to school in the morning, I need to be nice to the other kids and listen to what the teacher says. Kind of like Carl tells me, right? Be kind to others and generous with my time, right? And I said, okay. And I hung up that phone, and I'm watching the show called Laverne and Shirley. Yeah. Oh, thank you. Yeah. They're slower on this side, though, right? This side, they're Googling. This side over here, they're like, yeah, I think I know what he said. And there's a knock at the door, right? And I panic because I don't know what to do, right? And all of a sudden, I hear this. They start beating on it, and I crawl underneath the end table because I know I'm going to die, right? I just know it's the end of my life. And all of a sudden, I hear them beating on this window, and I know for sure I'm going to die. And I hear this, Jason, open the door. It's Grandma. Man, and just like that, I got relief, right? I crawled out from underneath this coffee table, and I opened up that door. My grandma was standing there, and she didn't look like my grandma, right? She looked like she'd been crying. She looked mad. She just didn't have the grandma mode going on. And she said, sweetie, get your stuff. You're coming to live at my house. Man, that's like hitting the lottery, right? Because when you go to Grandma's house, there's Rice Krispie treats, there's homemade cookies, there's popsicles, there's sheets on the bed. The sheets match the pillowcases. But most importantly, there's somebody there all the time, right? As an adult, man, that's an easy sell for a little kid. So I grab my little bit of stuff, and I get in her car. We get to her house. I run up the stairs. I'm running through the front room, headed to the kitchen, because that's where the Rice Krispie treats are. And I hear this, hey! And I turn around. It's my grandpa. He says, man, what are you doing here? I was like, man, I live here now. I didn't know my grandma didn't run it by him. You know what I mean? He's looking at me, and I'm looking at him, and he just said, yeah, you do, buddy, come here. And he gave me a hug, and I fell asleep on that man's lap for the next 3 or 4 years every single night because he made me feel safe, right? And I wasn't an easy kid. Look, I ended up in AA. And look, I'll just share it this way. Growing up, look, I remember career day at my school. I was like in the 3rd grade, and they were having this thing where everybody was going to dress up what they wanted to be when they grew up, right? And so it was like a Wednesday, and this was going to happen on a Friday. On Wednesday, we're all sitting in class, and this teacher, Miss Bo, she's going around this classroom asking everybody what they want to be. You know, there was doctors, there's presidents of the United States, there's a lot of police officers, a lot of firemen. And she got to me, and she said, Jason, what are you going to be when you grow up? I said, a bank robber, right? I was just as shocked as she was that it came out of my mouth. But 2 of my friends had already changed occupations and joined my gang, so I had to stick with it. And I remember I got sent home that week or that day with that letter, and I came back as a rodeo clown. But that's a whole other story. But that weekend, I remember sitting under the apple tree with this kid, Stevie, my neighbor kid, and we were talking. He was going to be a police officer when he grew up, and I was going to be a bank robber, and we were discussing our plans. And I said, but there's really no banks to rob on our block. And he said, there's a Kool-Aid stand. I said, oh, great idea. So I got me a bandana, a cowboy hat, and a BB gun, and I rode my bike up to the corner stand, Kool-Aid stand, and I robbed it. Yeah, didn't go real well, right? They didn't have any money. All they had was Kool-Aid, right? And I remember, man, I watched TV as a little kid, so I took a kid hostage, and I took him back to my backyard, and I tied him up to the clothesline pole, and I held him for ransom. I told everybody else to go get their piggy banks and meet me in my backyard. But here's where the problem happened, right? It was 5 o'clock, and at 5 o'clock at my house, my grandma yells dinner. If you don't go eat dinner, you don't eat, right? So I hear dinner, so I tell this young man, hey, I'll be back in about 20 minutes. I got to go eat, right? So I put my BB gun down, my bandana, and my cowboy hat, and I went inside, and I'm inside, and everything was going. This is where I got my first police contact in the 3rd grade. An officer showed up at the house, right? And we went to the backyard, and it just started going really bad, right? You know, like really bad, because all the neighbors show up. Like, not nowadays when a cop shows someone. Back then, when a cop showed up in the neighborhood, the whole neighborhood came, right? So everybody's in my backyard. They're trying to get these knots off this kid, and he's crying, and it's just not looking good for me. And my grandpa starts laughing really loud, right? And my grandma goes, what's so funny? He goes, man, you can't make this up. So then everybody's laughing, and that sent my grandma in a tailspin. And she grounded me for a month to the inside of the house. So now I'm crying, right? I've never been grounded before, but that's a long time inside a house. But as I was walking in, my grandpa said, hold on a second. He did some negotiation with my grandma, and then he came back and said, look, I didn't tie that young man up to the clothesline pole. There's no need to ground you to the inside of the house and punish me, right? You're grounded to the block. And I was like, oh, sweet. The guy became my hero. You know, he taught me when you get caught to share in a general way. And, yeah, you don't have to tell everything. And he became my friend until I got older, and then he became a problem. And as I got older, man, he is a good person, right? He's the kind of guy, if you dropped a quarter on the ground, he'd spend $1 to get it back to you if he knew it was yours. And as I got older, I thought he hated me, right? Because he was always turning me in, telling the judge where I lived, the police where I was hiding. You know, he was not good at being a grandpa, I thought. And we grew apart. My grandma, on the other hand, she just loved me no matter what, right? I don't know if anybody has somebody in their life or somebody that believed in them when they just don't give up on you, right? And I remember as a little kid thinking I didn't think she hated me. I just thought she felt sorry for me, right? And so, because look, anybody went on vacation, they had to take Jason. If I had a baseball game, my whole family, all my aunts and uncles came. But I remember being in middle school, and I got kicked off a school bus. I was getting ready to walk home, and my grandma came into the school, and she said, hey, we need to go in this room and talk to some teachers. And I said, okay. And we went in this room, and there's a round table. There's some teachers, a special needs lady from a school, and a principal, and a couple of counselors, and they're all on one side of this table. And there was 2 chairs, and we sat down, and they proceeded to tell my grandma everything I did wrong in the last 3 months. That I had no self-control, that I hit other kids, that I lied all the time, that I talked all the time, that I couldn't read or write at that level. And I remember thinking, man, she should probably say something by now. And she didn't. She just sat there, and she had that same look as she had when she picked me up at the front door. Like she was defeated, right? And when they got done, she said, may I say something? I'm like, finally. And they said, sure. She said, look, I'm not going to deny Jason did any of those things. He lives at our house. He's a tough kid, but he's a good kid. And the reason I know he's a good kid is because every morning he runs down to Mrs. Harrington's house. He throws her newspaper up on the front porch so she doesn't have to walk down the stairs. And Shane, the young man who's simple-minded, every time I see him at church on Sunday or the grocery store, the first thing he asks is, where's Jason? Because nobody picks on him when Jason's around. And when they play sports, Jason always picks him first for his team. Nobody told him to do those things. He did them on his own. So I know there's a good kid inside of there. And I think it's our responsibility to tap into that. And I remember, I had my best year of school that year. And I remember walking out and looking at my grandma for the first time in my life, believing somebody loved me, right? That somebody had my back. And I went wherever that lady went. That young man I tied up to the clothesline pole, Sean, became one of my best friends. I guess I need Alan on, right? I took him hostage right off the bat, right? And we went over to my friend Leif's house to sleep in his backyard. You don't do that a lot in Oregon. Right now it's sunny in Oregon. It's raining here. It's kind of odd, but I'll get over it. But we were in this backyard setting up our stuff for that night, and Leif's mom came out and said, hey, the adults are going bowling. There's $10 on the counter. We ordered you a pizza. Pay the pizza guy when he gets here and stay in the house. And when they left, the pizza came. My friend Leif says pizza tastes better with beer. I'd never drank beer before, but I said, yes, it does. And he went downstairs and he got a case of Lucky Lager beer. Yeah, it was nasty. And I didn't have that first drink. I didn't have that, oh, I feel good, whatever. I had to hold my nose and hang in there, right? But it kicked in, right? And I started having some good times. We're throwing rocks at cars and stuff like that in the backyard. for about 2 hours. And about 2 hours into this, man, I got food poisoning, man. That pizza was bad, man. And I'm sicker than a dog, right? And I rode my bike home. My friend said that was my first DUI. I get home, and I tell my grandma I don't feel good. She just looked at me in disgust, and I fall asleep. And I was sick all night, and I finally fall asleep. And the next morning I wake up, my grandpa's at the end of my bed yelling, "Get up, you got to go to work." I told him I don't feel good. He said, "Get up, you got to go to work." I said, "Man, I don't have a job. I'm in the 6th grade." And he said, "If you're going to drink like a big boy, you're going to work like a big boy. Now let's go." And I thought my grandma would save me because that's her job, but she handed me an egg salad sandwich, was still warm, and a thermos of warm milk and told me, "Have a great day," right? And we went and picked up Leif and Sean, who felt as bad as I did, and we had to go pick strawberries. It's against the law for a minor or anybody under 12 years old to pick strawberries in the state of Oregon, and not one kid has came and thanked me yet. Right? You think I'm politically happy about that right there, right? But I picked strawberries all day. I got sick, I picked strawberries. I got sick, I picked strawberries. I got sick. I made 27 cents or something like that. And I remember sitting there and I looked at my friends. I said, "Man, I'm not drinking anymore." They said, "You don't like the alcohol?" I said, "I don't mind the alcohol. I just don't want to work." Yeah. Right? So I quit cold turkey. No AA, no 12 steps, no treatment. I'm done. But what happened, man, is I got to high school. When I got to high school, this is because the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, this is where the allergy kicked in. Right? Because I started saving my lunch money Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, pitching in with some other guys and shoulder tapping on the weekends. And nobody was going to jail. Nobody was dying of a heroin overdose. We just played sports and we drank on the weekends. And life was going good. On May 5th, 1989, Carl's here. I stole a motorcycle. I usually like to say I borrowed it. I stole a motorcycle and I got in a high-speed chase. And I crashed and I woke up in ICU, not knowing what happened. I started talking to a nurse and asked her what happened. And she said, "You were in a drunk driving accident on a motorcycle." I told her I don't own a motorcycle. She said, "We know." And and I asked her, "Am I going to live or am I going to die?" She said, "You're probably going to live, but you're going to live, but you're probably going to lose your left leg. And if you don't lose your left leg, you'll never walk normal again." And I remember thinking to myself, okay, I'll just quit drinking, right? And I got out of that hospital with all the intentions to quit drinking. But at 2 weeks after getting out of that hospital, I have a bunch of voices in my head. I have some anxiety, and I don't know what to do when I drink, right? And because I just lower my standards to keep up with my quality of life, right? So eventually I'm living in an abandoned house, and I'm okay with that, right? I'm that guy in every family has that one guy that everybody just goes, oh, or like he's at a family outing and a commercial comes on for a treatment center, everybody stops what they're doing and looks at you. I'm that guy in my family, right? And, and I would go like that. And I went to see my grandma for about a month or so, and then one of my uncles would show up and make me go down to a payphone and call my grandma. I'm like, "Why do I have to call grandma?" And they say, "Because she calls every hospital, every jail, every institution. She calls all your friends, and then she calls all of us. Has anybody seen Jason? Does anybody know if Jason's alive? Can somebody please go find Jason?" And so I call my grandma and tell her, "Grandma, I'm doing really good. I have a great job, and I'm working out of town. I'll come see you when I get back." Or I tell her I was coming the next day, and look, I'm not a bad guy, right? I meant that with all my heart. I love that lady more than anything in the world. But when I put alcohol in my body, I'm powerless over what happens. Right? And then I justify why I don't show up. I tell myself, well, if I'm not looking at you or I'm not seeing you face to face, I'm not lying to you and I'm not stealing from you and I'm not cheating you. Right? So I'm doing you a favor. And I would do that over and over. Every once in a while I'd go to my grandma's house and she would go to the bathroom and she'd leave $5 sticking out of her purse or leave $5 on the counter knowing I would steal it. Right? Because that's what I do. It's not because I'm a bad guy. I'm just powerless over alcohol. And I would do that over and over and over. And she didn't have a program. Right? She didn't have Al-Anon. She didn't have something that she could go to get relief. She had a grandson that was out there dying. And I would go over and over. On December 4th, 1997, my Uncle Dale showed up at my tent. I had got kicked out of an abandoned house, so that tells you I was doing really good at what I was doing. And he let me know that my grandma was in ICU. She'd been in there for about a week or so. They just took off her life support. Maybe I should come say goodbye. I told him, "Man, I don't want to go." He said, "I'm not asking if you want to go. You're going to go." He's a big biker guy, so I had to go. And we got in his truck, and he handed me a pint of vodka, and he said, "Just chug it." Right? And I chugged that vodka, and by the time I got to that hospital, I'm okay with me. Right? And I remember getting off that elevator and walking in. There's this kind of like, all my family was on that side of the room, and there was nobody over here, right? And only 2 or 3 people could go into the room at a time. And so I went over here, and I sat by myself, and nobody came over. My mom didn't even come over and talk to me. Right? I just sat over there, because I don't need anybody to tell me I'm a piece of crap. I know I'm a piece of crap that's not going to amount to nothing. I'm okay with that. Alcohol makes that all right. I can justify and rationalize any kind of problem I have in my head when I'm drinking and using. So I sat over there by myself, and finally my aunt came over, and Aunt Sandy, she said, get in there, say goodbye, and just get out of here. And I said, okay, and I went in there, and my Uncle Gary was standing there. He said, man, talk to her like she's here. She hasn't been awake all day. Just hold her hand, and don't worry about what anybody else thinks. Take as long as you want. And so I sat down, and I had her hand. I started talking to her, and she opened her eyes, and then she started talking back to me, and I panicked, right? Because people started coming to the door. People had flown in. I didn't know what to do. So I told her, Grandma, I'm doing really good. I have a great job, and there's a lot of people here that would like to see you. I'll come back tomorrow and see you. And she said, okay. And she told me she would pray for me. But I remember as I was walking out, she told my Uncle Gary, he's a good kid. You watch, he's going to do something with his life, right? And I remember just nutting up, man. And I walked back to my tent, and I do what you have to do. And a couple days later, my Uncle Dale showed up and said that my grandma had passed, and his family had come pick me up to take me to the funeral. Maybe I could shower. And I said, okay. And that day they came to pick me up, I hid in a closet with some Goldschlager and Jägermeister, and I didn't come out, right? Because I was too embarrassed, too ashamed, and too scared to face life. But when I put alcohol in my body, I can rationalize why I'm sitting in a closet in the dark. And I did it, and I didn't go. And I could hear them saying, you're going to regret this the rest of your life. And alcohol makes that okay. A couple weeks went by after the memorial, and man, I got caught up in the moment. And nobody had said my name like in a week or so. I had nothing in my body for a few days. And so I called my Uncle Gary, asked him if he was going to go to church, because I knew he was going to beat me up. We're like brothers. But I knew he wouldn't beat me up in church. I was hoping, right? And he said, yeah, and I went to this church, and I made some vital mistakes, right? I went there with nothing in my body, right? So I had nothing to kill the voices. But they started singing this song, How Great Thou Art, right? And I kind of got caught up in the moment. And then they sang that dang song, Amazing Grace. And now I'm crying like a little kid. And I look over at him. I said, hey, I think I have a drinking problem. And he says, you think? And the whole church went quiet, right? My aunt said the song was over, right? And I said, I might have a drug problem, too, if it makes you feel better about yourself. This is what he said, come to my house, we'll get you something to eat. You shower, we'll wash your clothes, and we'll figure out what you're going to do. And I went to his house, and I took a shower. When I came out, there was a phone book on the counter. And he said, you're going to go to treatment. I didn't know what treatment was, but I guess it was no time to negotiate. I called this place called Portland Adventist. I told them my uncle thinks I have a drinking problem. They got all excited on a Sunday, said, be here tomorrow, and we'll do an assessment. We might be able to get you into a treatment center. I said, all right. And then I told my uncle I was going to go. I needed $20, and I'd tell him how it went. He made me stay the night at his house, which was another miserable day. But I got up the next morning, and I remember when he was taking a shower, he had some alcohol in the liquor cabinet. I poured it in a Coke can. I started drinking it, and I'm ready to go to treatment. I went to this detox treatment center. I made a very vital mistake. It's Adventist, so that stands for they have no caffeine, no sugar, and no women. I mean, I'm 26 years old, and I'm living in the bushes. But those are big deals, right? And I didn't know you could just leave treatment. If you're in treatment, you shouldn't probably just leave, but it's not prison. I thought it was, so I'm watching shift changes. I'm watching the elevator go up and down. I'm thinking who I can beat up to get out of this place, because this is a vital mistake, right? And there was these 4 guys sitting with me, and it was December 29th, 1997, and they started talking about Alcoholics Anonymous. And I said, what's Alcoholics Anonymous? Man, and they said the miracle that got me here. They said there's caffeine, there's sugar, and there's women. I said, yeah. How do we where's it at? They said, a van's going to pick us up and take us. I was like, even better, I can escape from there, right? So the day came to go to this AA meeting, and I need to tell you, I hadn't seen my dad in 26 years. 3 years before this went down, my dad called my mom out of the blue to pay back all the back child support he owed. I went to a bank for about a total of 4 minutes. I said hi. I took my half of the money, which I paid back because of sponsorship. I said hi to this guy. I don't need a dad, and I left. 3 years later, I'm in this van with these 4 crazy guys that need AA, and I prayed to a God that I don't really believe in. Please don't let me owe anybody money, and please don't let me know anybody in AA, right? Nothing about staying sober. I just need to get out of this predicament I'm in. We get to this AA meeting. I walk in there, and sure enough, there's some caffeine, sugar, and there's not a lot of good-looking women, but there was like one, I think. I don't know. I shouldn't have said that out loud either. Right? And so I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to marry this lady. And I see this guy standing in the back. I tell these guys I'm with, I said, that looks like my dad. They said, you don't know who your dad is? I said, man, I've seen him one time in 26 years. They had a break. That's why I stayed in my chair, right? Because they had a break at this meeting. I walk up to this guy. I said, hey, do you know who I am? He said, nope. I said, I think you're my dad. And he said, Jason? I said, yeah. And I met my dad at my very first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. And it changed me, right? It changed my life. He took me to a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, right? I met this girl. I kissed her. She got pregnant. Then she got divorced, and then we got married. Yeah. If you're new here, you're wanted, welcome, and needed in Alcoholics Anonymous. That's not how you do relationships, right? And, yeah. And I started going to Alcoholics Anonymous, right? And for the next 3 years, I did one meeting a month, like a speaker's meeting like this. And the only reason I did the meeting is I was a raffle chair and I was stealing half the money, which I had to pay back because of sponsorship. So watch who you get as a sponsor, right? And so I'm going to this meeting. I don't want to go. It's a Saturday. I asked my wife for a divorce. She said no. I didn't know you could just say no. I thought you had to get an attorney and at least debate it or something. And she said, I'm going to the meeting. Maybe you should go. I said, screw AA. She went, and I made a vital mistake. I went into my daughter's room. I got a big book and a Bible, and I wrote a resignation letter to Alcoholics Anonymous. And I dated it, and I signed it. And I took it to this guy named John B. John B. I thought was the president of AA because he had a whole bunch of Nottigans. You know, California has this problem. You know what a Nottigan is? You guys call them sponsies or pigeons. I call them Nottigans. They're like the greeters, right? There's a whole line of them. When you get there, you're like, oh, crap, not again, right? Because they want to hug you, touch you, ask you how you're doing, right? Or they get called on in meetings. They talk about God, the sponsorship, their allergy of the body, their sponsor. I mean, stuff has absolutely nothing to do with AA when you're new, right? And I would just sit there and go, good God, not again, right? So I called them all Nottigans, and he had a lot of them, right? So I figured he was the president of AA, so I walked up in front of the meeting like this. I handed my resignation letter. He started reading it, and then he started laughing, like really loud. And the damn Nottigans were coming out of anywhere. I mean, they were everywhere. They're just coming, they're passing the letter around, and they're looking at it, and they're laughing, and I'm just standing there sweating, right? And he said, no. I go, what do you mean no? He goes, I'm not going to allow you to leave Alcoholics Anonymous. And what accidentally came out of my mouth is, will you sponsor me? Yeah. He quit laughing just like that. He said, are you willing to go to any link for victory over alcohol? And I just resigned with a letter. It's going to haunt me for the rest of my life, right? Whatever. He said, there's some things you're going to have to do. You're going to have to get on your knees in the morning. You're going to have to say, please help, thank you, amen. And at night, you got to get on your knees and just say thanks. God don't need to hear any more from you. Right? And I was like, all right. He said, you have to call me every morning at 6:30 for the next 90 days. You have to go to 5 meetings a week, 2 where he was at. That's a little overkill. And I couldn't drink in between meetings. And he said, if you do those things, your life's going to get better despite of you. You know what? Within 30 days, I was a head greeter. I was a Nottigan, right? I was the head greeter. I was self-appointed there too, right? I was the front of the line, and my job in Alcoholics Anonymous was to shake every lady's hand that walked through the door and look them in the eye and make sure they had a safe place to go and they felt safe. And every man that walked through the door, I had to hug them. Yeah, awkward. Tell them I love them. I'm doing better every day in every way. Very unnecessary, very uncalled for, very odd, right? But I did her, right? And, you know, for the next, 5 or 6 years, I did Alcoholics Anonymous as good as anybody. But here's the deal. At 9 years of sobriety, I couldn't stand you people, right? It's the same damn thing over and over. I wasn't looking to help anybody. I was trying to still get. And so I started selling drugs, dope, drugs, whatever, meth. Like there's no other, nobody in here has ever thought of selling drugs sober, right? Not one person can raise their hand and say, that was an idea. Lying bastards. All right, so I started doing that, and I got pretty good at it, right? And I bought this car, and I took it to a place called Les Schwab, put wheels and tires on it. I was pulling out, the wheel fell off, and I crashed. Yeah, that's all right. Les Schwab rented me a Chrysler 300. It looked like a Rolls Royce. It was 2007. It said Hemi on the side. I thought I had arrived. So I went and met this guy I'd been meeting every day for about a year. And I'm driving down the road after I met him, and a whole bunch of cop cars. They call it a task force. Swarmed my car. Yeah, and I had 157 grams of meth, and I didn't really know what to do with it, but I have a valid driver's license, proof of insurance. I haven't had a drink or drug in 9 years, right? And it's a rental car. I just got it, right? So I'll just put it under the seat and not tell them it came with the car, right? That's my thinking. So I stick the dope underneath the seat. And finally, an officer walks up, and he taps on the window. I roll it down because I didn't want them to know I knew they were there. And he said, Jason, which is another bad sign. He didn't even ask me for any identification, right? He said, could you shut the car off and step up on the curb? And I said, I sure can. And I shut the car off, and I opened up the door to get out. And as I'm getting out of here, I look down, and the seat's moving back all by itself. I've never had a car with a memory seat and never will. And it went all the way back, right? It didn't even hesitate. And my dope was right in the middle of the floor, right? And you can't yell do-over or timeout, right? You can't reach down and push it under. So I just shut the door and hope they wouldn't see it. They did. I got charged with commercial delivery, commercial possession, racketeering, intimidation of a federal witness, and a gun charge with 9 years of sobriety. Going to AA, sitting in the back, judging you people. Yeah. I'm going to tell you, I relapsed, right? I put a needle in my arm and I started doing things. My wife divorced me, which I thought was a bad call, but she has remarried me, which I think is a great call, but AA thinks is a bad call. But what happened, man, is I got sentenced to 48 months in prison. And when I was locked up, I got put in the hole for the first 3 weeks of my adventure. And I was in solitaire, right, by myself. And I had anxiety, I had fear, and I was scared to death, and I wasn't going anywhere, and I couldn't put nothing in my body. And I got down on my knees, and I said, please help, thank you, amen. And I got up on my knees, and if I got any kind of relief, I got back down, and I said, thanks. And something happened in the first few days I was in that cell. I remember sitting there with nothing in my body, realizing I had become the guy I despise, right? And I told myself right then and there, I'm powerless over alcohol. I didn't need to tell anybody else. I needed to tell God and myself. And my life changed. At 3 months and 27 days in that sentence, I got released. Some judges in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous in my area signed a piece of paper to get me a suspended sentence. I had to do the rest of my time in the state of Oregon. And all I had to do was get sober and get a job. And I've been an active member of Alcoholics Anonymous in good standing since that day, 11/30/07. I'm blessed, man. I'm a train wreck, right? There's two kinds of people in AA, those who show you what to do and those who show you what not to do, and they're both equally as important. Imagine where I fall in. And I started doing these things, and my life got better. My family, I got my family back. My daughter's 25 years old, and she's getting ready to go to law school to be a judge. And, I don't know, about 6-7 months ago, I was walking through the kitchen because there's a whole bunch of these sorority girls at my house. And they're trying to get my daughter to run for president of the United States, right, something at her college. So I said, hey, can I have a cabinet position? She said, they just said no. They didn't even hesitate, right? I said, well, what can I do if you're president? She said, you could be a greeter. So if my daughter makes it there and you want to see the White House, get there the first week because I probably won't have the job for long. And I like to say I'm a perfect father. I tell this story all the time. My daughter was 17 years old. My wife came to me and said, we're going on vacation. I said, great, where are we going? She said, Canada. I said, I can't go to Canada. She said, we know. And away they went. Right? So they're on vacation and I'm dog sitting. Or I guess you don't dog sit your own dog, but that's what it felt like I was doing, right? They come home. My daughter goes to her room. My wife comes into the kitchen, says, we need to talk. I said, what's up? She says, we need to talk and it's serious. I said, all right, give it to me. She said, when Bailey and I were in Canada, Bailey got a tattoo. I wasn't ready for that. Right? I saw a tramp stamp. I saw stripper poles. I saw Aerosmith videos. Look, if you're a stripper, one of my best crime partners was a stripper, so I love them. But when it's your 17-year-old daughter, somebody's going to prison. We're going to get divorced, and I got to figure out how to get that tattoo off her back, right? And so I called my wife some stuff you shouldn't call your wife, and she looked at me like I was crazy. So I went upstairs and I yelled at my daughter, and I said things to my daughter that if any one of you said to my daughter, I have no problem going back to prison at all, right? And that young lady just sat on her bed and cried and looked at me in fear. And I got in my car and I do what every good alcoholic does because I had to go for a ride. I called an Al-Anon, right? Because I figured they know how to get my wife arrested. They probably know how to get a divorce and they probably know how to get tattoos taken off, right? I can't be the first person in the history of this program to have this problem, right? So I call an Al-Anon and I explain to her what's going on in my car, and I don't know what Al-Anons do. I don't know if they write it down and then read it to themselves again. I don't know if they text it out as a group text and get response. It took like 3 miles. And finally she goes, I know what happened. You want to hear what just happened? I said, sure. She said, man, you just told your daughter she's not beautiful and any decisions she makes are not to your standards and her body's your... She said a lot of stuff that made me sound really bad. Right, really, if you want to get back to it. I said, man, I didn't mean any of that. She goes, I know you didn't. I go, what do I got to do? She says, you got to go back and make it right. And I said, okay. And I could hear her husband on the speakerphone going, you better invite God to go with you. So I'm like, yes. Can't get that on the video, huh? And so I went back and I sat in my driveway and I invited God to go with me. I went in. I told my wife I overreacted. She said, you did? I went upstairs. My daughter was still crying. I had to sit down on the bed and tell her I'm sorry, that I'm an idiot. I don't care what you do with your body. I don't care who you love. I don't care what you believe in. I don't care. You're the best thing that's ever happened to me, and you're the best thing I've ever done. That's all you need to know is I love you no matter what. She goes, I know, Dad. She goes, we knew you were going to overreact. And so I became a victim, right? And she goes, you want to see the tattoo? And I said, sure. And she lifts up her shirt, and on the side of her chest, there's an A symbol, and it says, one day at a time, right? Yeah, it gets worse, don't worry. Then there's a hand going like this and a hand going like this, right? And my first thought, but I use my inside voice this time, well, God, I hope you're not an alcoholic. And what's with the praying hands? We're not Catholic, right? But I didn't say anything. She goes, you want to know what it means? I said, sure. She said, if it wasn't for Alcoholics Anonymous, you and Mom would have never met, and I wouldn't be here. And she said, the hand going like this is Mom's hand because she's always serving the coffee and making the cookies. And the hand like this is yours, Dad, because you're always welcoming people to Alcoholics Anonymous and giving them a hand up. So now I'm sitting on the edge of the bed crying, right? This lady, Polly Pistol, said that was God kicking me in the nuts, right? So I avoid that lady too, right? And that's the relationship with my family. My wife, I love and adore today, right? I only have a few minutes, so let me get to the men's with my grandparents, right? Because to me, that's the biggest part of the program of Alcoholics Anonymous for me. You know, my grandpa was still alive. I went to his house to say, Grandpa, I don't know if you know this or not, but I'm in Alcoholics Anonymous. He said, Jason, everybody knows you're in Alcoholics Anonymous, and we're grateful, right? I said, you might know that, but you don't know. I stole a lot of money and borrowed a lot of money from you and Grandma. He goes, oh, I know. I said, well, I don't know how much. He said, I do. And he went into my grandma's room and he brought back these spiral notebooks. That's like, this thing makes me very nervous, right? This book right here. Like stacks of them, right? And my grandma was like the mob, right? Every transaction, she had contracts, IOUs. Jason borrowed 25 cents. Jason mowed the lawn. Yes, this one. Everything from like 1977 to like 1995, right? Everything. The lady was crazy. And I'm looking at this. I said, I can't pay all this back. He goes, I know. I go, what can I do? He says, man, you just keep helping people. I said, great. But it said in this thing, in 1984, Jason stole $5. Jason stole $5. Jason stole $5. I said, hey, how do you know I stole $5? He goes, that's an easy one. Every Thursday, I put $5 in the coffee cup in the hutch. Every Friday morning, it was gone. The only people who live here are you, me, and Grandma. Who do you think stole it? I was like, well, you're onto something, right? And I said, but if you knew I stole it, why didn't you tell me to stop? And this man's the man I thought hated me, said, Jason, stealing isn't wrong until it's wrong to you, and I'd rather you steal from me than our neighbors or your friends. And that's the guy I thought was out to get me. I got in my car, I called John, he said, how much you have to pay back? I said, nothing, all I got to do is help people. So I had to go back, and I told Grandpa, I guess that's not going to fly, right? I ended up buying cable TV till the day he died, right? And a couple weeks after he got cable TV, he called me up. Man, we talked about Pawn Stars. We talked about the History Channel. We talked about ESPN. He talked about news being on 24 hours a day. I mean, he talked for like 30 minutes on TV, right? And at the end of that thing, he said, man, this is the coolest gift anybody's ever given me. And I was making amends, right? I was making the amends. And when he died, we were good. And you know, my grandma on the other hand, I didn't know how to deal with that one because she was dead. But I went to the grave site. I looked for dragonflies, butterflies, bluebirds, ants, potato bugs, whatever you guys told me. I took flowers. I wrote letters. I did everything I could. But, man, I had this ache, right? I don't know if anybody's ever had somebody that believed in you and they're gone. And you don't know, man, and you just don't know how to make that right, and it just eats you up inside. And I prayed, and about, 7, 8 years ago, this guy, Jimmy Jack, sent me this story about this little boy, and it goes like this. He was the firstborn in his family, and his sisters were born, and his dad started paying attention to his sisters, and he got really jealous because he wasn't really paying attention to him. So he knew his dad liked football, so he went and asked his parents if he could play football, and they signed him up, and right away he realized he's a trumpet player, right? He's not a football player. He don't like the cold, and he don't like to be touched. But after every single game or every single practice, his dad would come find him and give him a hug and tell him he loved him and how proud he was of him. So the kid kept playing because he wanted that attention. His senior year, his team's going to the state championship game, and it's a couple weeks before the big game. The coach calls him over at practice, and everybody's standing there. He said, son, I don't know how to tell you this, but your dad had a heart attack today, and he didn't make it. And the young man hit his knees, and he's crying, and he gets up, and he asked the coach, hey, is it okay if I go home a little early today from practice? He said, I just need to go. And the coach says, man, this is just a game. Go take care of your family. Don't worry about football. And the young man said, okay. And he goes away, and the big game comes, and it's like the third quarter, and his team's losing really bad, and he doesn't show up till the third quarter. He runs out there. He runs up to the coach and asks if he could play, and the coach says, whatever, we're losing anyway, go in there. The young man intercepts the ball and runs it back for a touchdown. Then he makes some tackles. He ends up winning the football game, state championship for his team. The worst player in the school history just won the state championship, and everybody's all excited. And that night when the coach is leaving the locker room, he sees a young man sitting all by himself, and he walks over and he starts talking to him, and he tells him, man, take as long as you want. The young man says, thanks, coach. And the coach turns around and he starts to walk away, and he turns back around and he says, son, I need to ask you a question. He said, not really the best athlete I've ever coached before, but what happened out there tonight? That was a phenomenal game of football. And the young man said, coach, I don't know if you know this or not, but every game, even the games you didn't play me and I sat on the bench, or the games I lost for us, no matter what, my dad would come find me and give me a hug and tell me he loved me and how proud he was of me. That's what I did. And the coach said, man, you had a great dad. And the young man said, thanks, coach. And as the coach is walking away, the young man says, coach, I don't know if you know this or not, but my dad was blind. And tonight's the first night he ever really got to see me play. And just like that, I got relief. Just like that, because I know that every time I go into a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous and I say, my name is Jason Johnson, I'm an alcoholic, my grandma gets to see that. That might not be a big deal to you, but if you're powerless over alcohol and you've traded everything you have away for that, it's a big deal. You know, I know that when I die, I go to that big meeting in the sky. They talk about, I'm going there because I want to make sure there's a Bill, Bob, and a Jesus, right? If anybody's missing, I'll let you know, right? But I know who's going to be in the parking lot waiting to greet me. It'll be my grandparents, right? My grandpa, if you're not a half hour early or late, I don't know how that works when you're dead, but they'll probably wave to me because he thinks I never know where I'm going, right? And I know what's going to happen. For the first time in my life, because I've been hugging men in Alcoholics Anonymous when it wasn't convenient or necessary, I'm going to be able to hug my grandpa for the very first time and tell him I love him and thank him for giving me a safe place to live. My grandma, on the other hand, she's going to be probably dancing around praising Jesus and thanking God and telling my grandpa, I told you so. But I know what she's going to do. She's going to hug me. She's going to tell me she loved me. She's proud of me. And for the first time in my life, as an adult, sober, I'm going to be able to look my grandma in the eye and say, Grandma, it's the damnedest thing. These people in this program called Alcoholics Anonymous, they found a solution to their problem and they introduced it to me. But most importantly, Grandma, some of those people showed me some grace. And in doing that, they introduced me to that kid inside of here that only you believed existed. Man, I'm blessed. I'm a grateful member of Alcoholics Anonymous. You folks did that for me. If you're new here, Alcoholics Anonymous works and God is real, right? And I'm glad you did not give up on yourself. You know, I have 2 minutes. You know, I spoke at a conference. She said they're going to stand up here and shake our hands. Sometimes that doesn't go really well, Karla. Because there's people in Alcoholics Anonymous, sometimes they get mad at you. Sometimes they're just pissed off, right? Or they're coming up to say thank you because they just got done telling their sponsor, that's an hour of my life I'll never get back. And he's like, good, go greet him and tell him thanks, right? So I'm at this conference, and it's a state conference, so it's like all the GSRs, yeah, it's not me, right? I'm not a political guy in AA, but that's what this convention is. It's 5 states. And I get there and I look at this sign and I was like, man, you got the wrong guy. I'll pay for my own way home. You need to get a different speaker. The guy goes, no, you're the guy we want. And I was like, whatever. And the slogan was a seat for everyone. I was like, that's going to bite him in the ass in about an hour or 6 or something like that, right? But I got up and I participated that whole weekend, right, with that thing. And I got up that Saturday night and I gave my talk. And afterwards they had that gratitude line. And and it's a big line and people are going. And I'm looking to see, because I'm hungry now, and I'm looking to see how many more people. And I lock eyes with this lady. Right, and I look back, because when you ever lock eyes with somebody, it's kind of awkward where they're either mad at you or just awkward, right? That's this little old lady. I lock eyes with her, oh, geez, right? So then I looked again to make sure if it was really true, and we were locking eyes, and I'm like, that's the lady that's mad at me right there, right? So I'm like, thank you, thank you, thank you. And I'm like, man, she should be here by now, right? And I look up, and she's gone. I'm like, oh. I look at the back of the line. She's at the back of the line staring at me still. I'm like, oh, Jesus, that lady hates me, right? So it gets down, it's just her and I were standing in this aisleway, and she's looking at me, and I'm looking at her, and she said, I'm a grandma, can I give you a hug? I'm like, man, absolutely, right? I'll take a hug. And she came up and she gave me a hug, and we started talking. She said, I have a 24-year-old granddaughter who's out there drinking and using, and people are saying a lot of bad things about her. Her sisters are saying a lot of bad things, and they're saying she's doing a lot of bad things. But she's my granddaughter, and I love her. I said, okay. And she said, I'm not a member of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I'm not a member of Al-Anon. She said, I'm here because my friend from church who pays for my granddaughter every Sunday morning, her and her husband had tickets to this banquet tonight, and he got sick, and she called me to come hear a story of hope. And I want to thank you for giving me some hope. And we stood there and we just looked at each other, and and as she started to walk away, she turned back around. She goes, "Hey, you know why your grandma wrote all that stuff down in those books?" I said, "No." I asked my grandpa once. He just laughed and said, "No," and changed the channel on the TV. And she goes, "I know why." I go, "Why is that?" She goes, "Because she knew no matter all the bad things people were saying about you and all the bad things you were doing, that one day you would come back and make that right." So now I'm crying again, right? And I'm sitting in this chair on the corner, and I'm crying. I look down, I see these big feet, and this guy's staring at me. I stand up, and he's a big guy. He goes, we started talking. He said, "Man, I have 60 days of sobriety," and I heard everything that lady said, and I felt it. I felt goosebumps, man. I felt when she shared that. It moved me. And I told him, "Man, this old guy told me once, if you feel goosebumps, that's God tapping you on the shoulder, telling you you're welcome." And he just looked at me, right, and we started hugging. But I realized right then and there, maybe I made amends to my grandma in real life, right? But most importantly, I felt something. If you're new here, I hope you feel something in AA. Thanks.